Hello friends, it's Shari, and today I am making a really fun card mixing some stamp sets new and old. I'm creating some little scenes with the cute little doxies from Furry and Bright. I'm going to be using a bunch of the art supplies from Just Add Glitter. Along with those art supplies, I'm going to pull in the little paint pot from Chirpy Chirp Chirp. And I'm also going to pull in this cute little banner from the Virtual Friends add-on set. And I'm using this little beret from Bicycle Built for Two to make my little dog artists. And then I'm also going to use that little heart string from Yay Kites. So I'm coloring my little doxies similar to the ones I colored on the Merry and Bright card. So I'm going to make 3 different ones. Of course, this one here, Getting into Mischief, is going to be my new little puppy Scout. So she is a black and tan. She has that brown around her muzzle, around her little bum there, and on her legs, her belly, and then she's got a nice little stripe across her chest. She also has a white spot on her chest, which is what I initially colored with that really pale warm gray. You can't really see that right now, but you'll see it when I outline it. Then I'm going in with a W5. So this is not my darkest gray that I'm going to use. I'm adding a little bit of brown just to the edges of her ears. She has that kind of going on. So I'm just tracing around those spots that I created with the brown initially. So you can see where that white spot is on her chest. I'm going to go around the little brown spots above her eyes, around the brown of her muzzle, and I'm just filling in everywhere, tracing around those brown spots with this W5. Then I'm going to go in with a darker gray, that W7, and I'm going to start darkening that up and pulling in some shadows. Like I said, she is a black and tan, so she is definitely black, but I don't like to use stark black because I think you lose some of the details by using black. So I like to use grays when I'm making a black critter. So I've gone around the outside with that W7, and then I'm going back with that W5 to just darken up the lighter areas just a little bit. Now I'm moving on to this one that's going to be holding the paintbrush, and I'm going to make a little dapple doxy here. So again, I'm using that same brown for the muzzle and the feet, the little dot over the eye, and then I'm using the E70s to create my base color for the rest of the body. So I'm starting out with the E71, and I'm just going to fill it all in. Again, tracing around those brown spots that I created initially. And I'll just go until it's nice and smooth and you don't see my marker brush marks anymore. And it also darkens it up a little bit. And then I'm going in with the E74. And I'm going to do some stippling. So this is just dots with my marker. Now these are going to kind of blend out a little bit because that E71 is still very wet. If you want more of a dot that doesn't blend out, you can wait for that to dry a little bit. And then I'm going to go in with the E77, which is even darker, and just add some more little dots. So you get a nice texture and that dapple look with those different shades of stippling and dots that you create. Now I also want something lighter, so I'm going to break out my white gel pen, get that going, and then I'm just going to do some white dots as well. So there is my cute little dapple doxy. And then for my third one, I thought I would do a red short hair doxy. There are tons of colors of dachshunds out there, and this is what my little Penny that passed away a couple years ago, she was a red, so I like to include her as much as possible. So I started out with the E23 and went all over. Then I'm going in with an E25 to create some shadows under the belly and on the legs, under the chin, the bottom of the ears. And then I'll just blend that out again with the E23. So that's going to darken it up a little bit and create a nice dark brown dog. And then I am going back with that E25 just for a couple little more shadows to define things a bit more. Now I can move on to the accessories that I stamped out. Again, this paint bucket is from the Chirpy Chirp Chirp stamp set. I just thought that it worked perfectly with all of the art supplies that we have. And I'm going to color them with 2 different colors of paint. So I'm kind of going to go in rainbow order across my panels, and these paint buckets are going to be on the middle panel, which is why I am coloring them with yellow and green. And then I'll just use a cool gray for the bucket and just add a little bit more of that exact same one right under the paint. So it's a very subtle shadow. For the glue, I'm going with the traditional Elmer's, so an orange top, and then I'm going to do a blue label. I'm going to color in the twine with some purple, and then I'm going to color my glitter jar. Now, I did change the colors on this once I got it on the card because I felt like the colors that I used were a little too pastel to go with the other things on the card. But it was no big deal because I used the same colors, just a little bit darker. Now for the paper, I thought about doing them both white, but everything's so colorful that I decided that I needed to make it more like cardstock or construction paper. So I'm going with the pink, and I'm actually going to go over that pale brown with an orange. I'm coloring my scissor handles purple. That's the same purple I used for the spool of twine. And then here is where I'm going in and covering up that with orange. I just think that it makes it look a lot better and those colors really pop. And you can see that I'm sort of putting my markers off to the side, which is going to work really well when I go to color that bunting banner because I'm going to pull the colors from the ones I've already used. So I put pink on the paintbrush because what that little dog is going to be painting is going to be my warm colors, my pinks and my oranges. And then of course I'll use some brown for the brush. I colored my tape blue, traditional ruler with some yellow, and then this little jar of paint or glue or whatever this is, I'm not exactly sure. I'm just going to color with 2 shades of teal and a little bit of gray for the top. Now, as I said, I've been putting all those markers to the side. So now I'm just going to pull out my colors from the markers that are sitting there and color my little bunting banner in pink, orange, yellow, green, and teal. So it makes it easy to make sure my colors match because I've just laid those to the side as I was coloring all my other elements. And now that I have all my images colored, I can cut them out with the coordinating dies. And then I'm going to set these aside and work on my little scene panels. So I'm going to be using the square from the Canvas and Easel die set. I've cut 3 of those squares from white and 2 of those squares from narwhal. You could use any stitch square. This one was a perfect size for what I wanted to do. And I'm going to be doing some stenciling on the 3 white ones. So I'm starting out with the brick stencil, and I'm going to only show one of these, but I did the same thing to all 3. I've put a little bit of removable adhesive on the back of the square so I can stick it to my media mat, and then I'm going to line up my stencil where I want it. And then I'm using some Manatee ink and a very light hand with a blending brush to create a brick background. Now you can see I'm tapping off my ink on a piece of scrap paper so that I keep this very, very light. So actually it doesn't look like I'm doing very much because it's so light, but when I pull the stencil away, you'll be able to see that brick pattern. And it's actually maybe a little too light at the bottom, so I'm just going to line it up and add just a little bit more. And I did the same thing to the other 2 panels. And then for the bottom, the narwhal pieces, this is going to be basically the floor or the ground. I'm going to stamp the sentiment on 2 of them. So I'm taking a sentiment from Just Add Glitter that says, I made this just for you. I'm stamping the first part to the left of one square at the bottom, and then the second part of the sentiment to the right of one square at the bottom. And this is going to be the floor on my far left and my far right panels. I'm just trimming this off to 3/4 of an inch. I'll trim off the other side as well. That will be the floor of my middle panel with no sentiment on it. And then you can see how this is going to lay out with those pieces right along the bottom of each panel. And then I have a dog on each panel as well. So now to do some stenciling of the paint splatters or the artwork that these cute little dogs are creating, I'm going to start out with my one in the center. And I'm just going to pick a couple splatters that I want. So I'm going to be masking off the splatters I don't want to ink up, just with some Post-it note tape. For the first one, I'm using Twisted Citron and Lucky Clover, and I'm using Distress Oxides for these so that it really sits on top of that brick stencil that I already inked. So I'm starting with that Twisted Citron to the left, and then I'm going to do some Lucky Clover to the right, getting that second splatter in there. And then I'll go back to my Twisted Citron and blend between the two on that larger splatter. So when I pull this away, I have these really fun splatters on that background. Now I'm going to do the same. This is the panel that's on the far left. So for this one, I'm going to use some of my warm colors, my pinks and oranges and yellows. So I've got some abandoned coral, some wild honey, and then I'm also going to pull in some mustard seed. So I'll use that abandoned coral on the far left, kind of fill in that whole little splatter there, pull that color into the big splatter. The big splatters are really fun to be the place to blend your colors together, I think. So I'll just pull that in there, and those two make a really nice orange where they blend together. And then for that little splatter, since this one has 3, I'm going to pull in that mustard seed a little bit as well. And just blend the two together between mustard seed and wild honey. So when I pull this off, you can see I got some fun splatters on that one. And then for the third one, I'm going to find a nice big splatter. I want it to look like this. This one is running through some paint and glitter and kicking it up on the wall, because that is something I feel like Scout would do if there was some paint left unattended. So I'm just picking the splatters I want for this one, masking off the little pieces that I don't want any ink, and then I'm going to use some Salty Ocean Distress Oxide and some Wilted Violet Oxide on this one. So I get a nice rainbow color, all those colors going from left to right on this card. So again, I'll pull that Salty Ocean into that big splatter, and then that Wilted Violet, and then I'll blend the two together sort of in the middle. And I do think that this oxide, because it is that pigment ink, looks a lot more like paint that's been splattered on the wall. Alright, so here are my 3 panels, and then I can start to assemble these. So I'm just going to go ahead and add my ground piece to each of these using some liquid glue, line it up on the bottom, and you can see since I used that same die to cut them, I have that nice stitching detail around all 4 sides. So for this one on the left side, I've got that cute little beret that was from Bicycle Built for Two. I think this is adorable on these little dogs and really makes them look like an artist. Then I have that cute little paintbrush from Just Add Glitter, and it works perfect behind. It looks like he's holding it in his mouth. He's up on the wall and he's painting that really fun paint splatter. I'm going to pop him up on some foam squares here in just a minute, so he's just there sort of as a placement. And then I can put some of my art supplies. I've got the paper on the floor, that little bottle of glue or paint. I've also got the fun scissors. I mean, these dogs, they're creative, but they're messy, obviously. They have stuff everywhere. So I've got some foam squares behind so it's popped up a little bit, and I'm just going to place it like it is painting that splatter on the wall. Then I'm moving on to my middle panel. This is where I'm going to put that little banner I colored earlier. I just thought that it kind of added something to everything and made it look like a fun party. Then I have the buckets of paint are going to go on this one. So I'm going to put this one on its side because I'm going to add something to look like the paint has spilled out. And then the other bucket, I wanted it on this dog's head. So what I decided to do to make it look more like it's on its head, like it was painting and it was chaos. He ended up with a bucket on his head. I cut off the inside of the bucket, and then I'm just going to place it on his head. And then, of course, I'm going to add some foam squares behind and put him right here on the card. And then this is where I'm also adding my glue bottle, and I put a foam square behind that as well, so it was the same level and dimension as the dog. And then finally I have Scout, who's into trouble and kicking up some paint onto the wall. And she's going to be pulling some string because she would totally do this. She keeps stealing our socks and running off with them. So I've got the twine to kind of go with the string that I'm going to use, and then the glitter. And this is where I felt like the glitter colors I colored were a little too pastel for all the other colors I had used. So I went back in with the pink and the teal that I used on other things and darkened it up. Now I'm stamping that string that goes in a heart shape with some guava ink, and I will cut it out with the coordinating die. And then I have some of the gray paper from the Flower Market collection. I'm just cutting this to 8 1/4 by 3 1/4. So it is 1/4 inch smaller than the Slimline. So I'm going to get a little 1/8 inch border of white around it. And I just thought this gray worked perfect with all the colors I have on these panels. I didn't want it to distract. I'm popping up each of these panels with some foam tape. And I'm starting with my center one, and then I'll just tuck the other ones behind that center one. And now I can add my little string that Scout's pulling along with some liquid glue. And I kind of like that it's sort of going off the top of the panel. And then now to embellish. So I'm breaking out my liquid pearls, which I don't use very often, but I thought this looked perfect as paint spilled on the floor. So I've got a green color to go with my green paint, and then I also have a yellow one that I'm going to add to the yellow paint pot, like it's dripping down on my Penny dog's head. A little bit on her ear as well, and then of course there's going to be some on the floor because that bucket is upside down and she made a big old mess. Now for the glitter, I'm using some Stardust Stickles. So we got glitter on the floor. We've got Scout kicking glitter up onto the wall. I actually added some to her feet after I was done because glitter gets everywhere. And then so that there was some embellishment on that far left panel, I added a little bit of glitter to the paper. And here is my finished card, and I just think it is so adorable. I love how it turned out, and I love that we can use those cute little Doxies all year round. I hope this has inspired you to look at your stamps and mix them up and create something new. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.